Is pornography the problem? Well, it is a problem, but maybe it's also a solution. We are going to talk about that in some very interesting and I believe healing ways today. And I'll introduce my guest in just a moment. I'm Dr. Carol, and thank you for joining me here on Relationship Prescriptions. If you're watching, you will notice that this is a different place, a different setting than you're used to seeing. I am here in Colorado Springs with the Focus on the Family headquarters for the Sexual Integrity Leadership Summit, which Focus is hosting this week. This has been an awesome experience already, and there's more of the conference yet to come. But in this conversation, I have a very special guest, Drew Boa, who I'll let him introduce himself in just a moment. But we are going to talk about some sensitive and we're going to be raw and honest. I'm thrilled that we get to go there in this conversation. But if you have young ears around, you might want to occupy them. Otherwise, just know that there might be some triggers in this conversation, just be aware. But I am really excited to have you meet my guest, Drew Boa. Would you just introduce yourself for a minute?
Thanks, Carol. This is such a unique gathering.
Yeah.
From ministries all over the country specializing in different areas of sexual brokenness, and you and I have been sitting across the hall from each other. So I got here because of my own story of attachment to porn, really driven by a very specific sexual fetish for braces. I had no idea that my specific attractions and fantasies had something to do with my life experiences, and specifically in middle school.
Wow.
Surprise, surprise. So as a 13-year-old boy, I had this love-hate relationship with Jesus and with porn.
Yes.
They were the two saviors in my life. When I was growing up, dislocated, moving around between the United States, Canada, Mexico, Puerto Rico, and at a family where I thought everybody was perfect, but I actually didn't really feel connected to anybody.
Yeah.
So that's really where porn came into my life and where Jesus came into my life together. And through an incredible healing journey, I've been free from porn for the last 10 years. And now I'm helping other men take that same journey.
Yeah. Well, your story is not unique in the sense of struggling with porn and loving Jesus. And that's what I love about your openness with all of that. And we're going to dive into a couple of those specifics. But something that I want to ask you, I hear from a lot of young people who may struggle with porn and sexual challenges that, oh, if I get married, then that's going to fix everything. Was that something you thought, and did it fix everything?
Oh, yeah. I was holding my breath sexually for years, hoping that one day I'd be able to let it all out sexually, according to the teachings of purity culture. Now, there's nothing wrong with teaching people to abstain from sex before marriage, but the attitude of toxic shame and sexual repression created this binge purge cycle.
Yes.
Where I would be constantly trying to fight a battle against my sexuality until I was so frustrated and exhausted that I would just give in. And this is the cycle that so many men and so many women actually find themselves in.
Right.
In this pornography, which is so accessible, it's anonymous, it's available, and it's increasingly abusive as well. So we have what I call an attachment to porn. And really getting free is about breaking up with this sexually abusive partner. It's not like giving up chocolate or trying to go to the gym more. It's like leaving somebody who has been there for you for a long time. And when you bring porn into a marriage is not the solution. In fact, it only compounds the suffering.
Wow.
Because now another person has to suffer the consequences of what I am bringing into the relationship.
So getting married doesn't solve your sex issue.
No, it doesn't, because people think that, well, when I have sex in marriage, then I won't need the porn.
Right.
But the truth is, that is an incredibly dehumanizing, objective way to view the person you love the most. She is not a replacement for porn. She is not a sexual vending machine. She deserves to be loved.
Yeah.
But as my friend Andrew Bauman says, so many of us have developed a pornographic style of relating in which I am not focused on what does this other person need? What beauty can we co-create together? But rather, what can I get out of this?
Yes.
What can I get away with?
Yes.
Even people asking, what is sin or what is not sin is essentially like, how much can I get away with?
Right.
While remaining so-called pure, rather than thinking, who am I becoming and what are we creating together? Porn trains us to be self-absorbed, self-stimulated, immediate gratification, and ultimately disenchanted with a real human person.
Yeah.
Right?
So how did your history of using porn impact your experience with your wife once you got married?
Once I got married, I actually had a year of sobriety from porn,
Yeah.
which I would strongly recommend to anyone considering marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And also, can I get a little graphic?
Yes, my audience is used to us going there. So, Drew, yes, you can go there. You can go there.
So by the time I got married, I had probably experienced 2,000 orgasms
Wow.
to sexual fantasy and porn.
Wow. Wow.
Think about that in terms of neuroplasticity
Yes.
and conditioning.
Yes.
It took me actually 7 months to be able to have full sexual intercourse with my wife.
You're talking about a porn-induced sexual dysfunction.
Correct.
And you experienced it. I just got to break in here for a second. I am friends with a adolescent psychologist, and he said they are seeing a tsunami of sexual dysfunction in even teens, certainly 20s, because of the porn epidemic.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, erectile dysfunction used to be less than 10% of men under age 30, but those numbers are skyrocketing now, and people have no problem having a sexual arousal with the digital stimulus.
Yes.
But interpersonally, there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
And for me, growing up in purity culture, I had a very negative view of sex and a very negative view of female nudity. So I brought that into my marriage. Now, even after 8 years of marriage now, I've had a few hundred sexual encounters with my wife, but it's still not more than 20% of what I had already accumulated.
Wow.
So in terms of neuroplasticity, we don't want to make excuses.
Yes.
But we also want to validate what we're up against. Why is it so stubborn? Why are these sexual patterns so stubborn and so difficult for adults to overcome? Well, we're dealing with decades of conditioning.
Yeah. I am grateful, Drew, that you are willing to share that part of your story.
Yeah.
Because I think for a lot of guys, that would feel very shameful to say, I got married to this beautiful woman and now I'm struggling with arousal with her.
And it's not about her.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after all this, what was it in your soul that said, this isn't okay? You started out by saying you love Jesus, but what turned the corner for you?
I knew at a gut level that masturbating to pornography is not who I want to be.
Yeah.
But what made the biggest difference was finding out that this struggle is not what's wrong with me. It's what happened to me. We talked a little bit earlier about how porn is a sexualized solution.
Yes.
It's not just a sin, but also a false savior for our specific suffering and the pain that porn can pacify. At the same time, porn is also a predator that is exploiting young boys and girls.
Yeah.
The vast majority of my clients would say that porn is all my fault. They take all the responsibility, when reality, they were targeted. Before they chose porn, porn chose them. Before they hunted for porn, porn hunted for them. And so we're dealing with little boys and little girls who got stuck sexually. And now we carried those patterns into adulthood. So in order to outgrow those patterns, we need to heal those childhood experiences at the root.
Yeah. I appreciate that you are including both boys and girls because the data, and you probably are well aware of this, Drew, shows that although statistically there's more young men who are addicted to porn, it's a big issue and growing fast among young women. You mentioned the kind of inner process, inner matters of the heart that porn is presented as solving, but I want to get there a little bit more. What were some of the needs that you experienced in your heart that you now know porn was presenting itself as a solution for, or that the men you now work with experienced that porn presented itself as a false savior for?
Every story is so unique.
Yeah.
Porn fathered me. My dad didn't talk about sex. I didn't talk about his sexual story. He was not vulnerable with me. He didn't guide me. Porn substituted for real sexual education.
Yeah.
Porn also mothered me. Porn gave me care and nurture and asked for nothing in return.
Yeah.
Porn didn't need me. While my dad was working 12 hours a day and we're moving around between countries, my mom's alone at home and she really needed me. Well, that conditioned me to want an intimacy where I'm not needed.
Yes.
I'm not required to give anything. Porn was essentially a fake nipple with no milk.
Wow.
Right? So porn fathered me, porn mothered me, and porn also was my only friend when I didn't have any. I would come home from school every day, longing to go to my computer and finally get an ounce of connection.
It's reliable. It's always there.
Yeah.
There's no times when it, quotes, fails you.
Right.
Unconditional fake love. And
Yes.
I want to be really clear, totally fake.
Right.
But doesn't require anything from you, which is a very different experience from a marriage because building a relationship requires something from you.
Yes, exactly. Right? So a huge part of the healing journey is learning how to grow up in those different emotional areas.
Yeah.
Learning how to become my own primary caregiver instead of delegating that to some kind of fantasy or masturbation. Like, it's not about the sex. It's not a sexual hunger at the core. It's an emotional emptiness.
Yeah. What would you say to the guy who says, well, it is about sex? Either I'm not married right now, or for whatever relationship issues are going on, my wife isn't responsive to sex as much as I want. So it really is about sex. I need this. Because I hear some guys, yes, I'm a woman, but some guys talk to me, and they say, I just have to ejaculate. I've got to have this.
Yeah.
How do you answer that?
That feeling is totally understandable if you are in a constant battle of repressing your sexuality
Right.
until you have to release it. Rather, what I'm advocating for is finding out what your deeper needs are because no one needs sex.
Thank you.
No one has ever died without an orgasm.
Thank you.
Your body contains natural processes to release energy, even without conscious effort.
Right.
Through nocturnal emissions, through urine, through coregasms or abgasms, which most men or most people have never heard of because they've never gone so long without masturbating to allow a coregasm to happen. But the point is, you will be just fine if you never have another orgasm. It's not the same as food. It's not the same as water. However, no one can survive and thrive without intimacy.
You're talking my language,
Yeah.
Drew. Intimacy is so core to how God made us in his image. And those who have been watching me in this program for a while will know I talk about that a lot. And thank you for going there.
Yeah, so when I get a really strong sexual urge or a fantasy that just feels irresistible, rather than going into fight, flight, or freeze, I ask myself, wonder where this might be coming from.
Wow.
Hello, sexuality. Nice to see you. If it feels really strong and I understand, oh, this is probably coming from somewhere in my story, I'll say, hello, childhood. Hello, little Drew. What are you trying to tell me? And that's a very different approach.
Yes, yes. I love that you went to story. You are just leading me where I was hoping this conversation would go. In your work now, and for the last some years, husband material, with other guys that you help shepherd along, talk about the role of dealing with their story and how you help them process all of this.
Yeah. Every trigger tells a story. Every trigger tells a story. I talk about two types of triggers, pain triggers and pleasure triggers. So pain and pleasure are co-located in the brain. The amygdala has a lot to do with this.
Yeah, yeah.
So when I feel not just frustrated, but infuriated, I'm being triggered. You know, unless the present circumstances really are a crisis, usually when we have a strong emotional response, there's something more going on. When I don't just feel disappointed, but devastated, right? And the emotion feels intolerable. That's what I call a pain trigger. So then pleasure triggers are sexual attractions or stimuli that feel not just attractive, like, oh, seeing someone who's beautiful, like, oh, I can appreciate that person and move on. But if that feels irresistible, like disproportionately strong, then that's what I call a pleasure trigger. And every trigger tells a story. Here's how we find out that story in the simplest way. Ask yourself, when have I felt this way before? So if I'm feeling powerless, stressed, trapped, when have I felt this way before? Maybe I'll consider some of the thoughts going through my head. I can't do this. No one really understands me. Okay, when have I felt this way before? And that will take us back to some of our formative stories and our body memories, our implicit memories that are being re-experienced, even if we don't realize it. Now, the question for pleasure triggers is a little different. It's when have I felt the exact opposite? So if I see someone who makes me feel accepted, when have I felt rejected?
Okay.
If I see someone who makes me feel affirmed, well, when have I felt unaffirmed? If I see someone who just feels so warm and close, when have I felt cold and distant?
Yeah.
You know? And so that helps us kind of get into our stories.
Yeah.
And you see, that's different. Like if all I'm thinking about is the sex, then I'll never really understand myself.
Right. Right. So this is getting to the matters of the heart, a layer deeper than just the biological urge.
Right.
You've talked about triggers and arousal and your particular arousal pattern. A question that I have had guys ask that I have an answer, but you as a guy, I want to hear your answer. Can your arousal pattern change? And if it can, I'm sure it's not an overnight process. Can you talk at all about what that might involve? I'm just thinking about how long it took you and your wife to fully engage sexually when you were married because of your arousal pattern that had been built up.
Well, if we understand neuroplasticity, for example, the book The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Deutsch, arousal does change. Even in a marriage, I'm 32 years old. I hope to be married when I'm 62 years old.
Right.
In order to have a long-term relationship, my arousal pattern needs to change with my wife's body over time.
Yeah.
So let's just normalize that arousal does change.
Sure.
But trying to remove it is both unhelpful and unethical. It's like trying to remove an emotion. If I'm like, I'm never going to feel anger again. I'm never going to allow myself to feel sad again. That is ultimately doing more harm, and that anger or that sadness is just going to get stronger. Well, the same is true for sexual feelings.
Yeah.
You know, whatever I disown is going to declare war on me sooner or later. So trying to get rid of arousal is a losing battle that is self-defeating.
Yeah.
However, as we can understand, appreciate, and bless our arousal and manage it in healthy ways, it can become less intense, less out of control, less overwhelming. You could think about it like turning down the volume.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It is not as out of my ability to, to deal with it. I can be with it, right? I don't have to battle it. I can be with it and just allow the arousal to exist.
You used some phrases in talking to yourself a minute ago that I think I would apply right to what you're saying now. Oh, hello, sexuality. Hello, arousal.
Yeah.
Rather than making that the driver. So you can befriend that part of you in a way rather than seeing it as a god or a guide.
Yeah. Or my worst enemy.
Right. Yes.
God created sexuality. It's good. And we know that all parts of us are fallen too.
Yeah.
So something can't really be broken unless it's good and beautiful at the core.
That's a good point.
Right?
I like that. Yeah.
So can arousal change? Yes, but not in the ways that you might think. And these shifts usually come as a byproduct of being able to integrate and regulate at a deeper level.
That's good. Yeah. That's good. As I have found out just a little bit about what you do, I think there's some just powerful parts of that. But before I ask you a little bit more about husband material, I know one of the things you do is helping guys connect with each other in a kind of community. And we've mentioned intimacy and so on. And you mentioned neuroplasticity. I kind of geek out on the neurobiology part of some of this sometimes. Talk about the importance of that. What difference does it make? I hear from guys who say, I never would want to tell anybody about this. Why, I don't know how. I'm an introvert. I think this is such an enormous part of becoming whole as followers of Jesus, and especially sexually whole. So I've given you kind of a door there to kind of walk in and talk about that.
Yeah, as a famous TED Talk by Johann Hari has said, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection.
Yes.
Right? We're created for connection. We're wired for intimacy. And so by creating space for that connection, we eliminate a lot of the need for the false version of it.
Yeah.
And in today's world, male friendship is at an all-time low.
Yes.
The decline, specifically of male friendship, has been well documented and lamented. So men are lonelier than ever, whether they're married or not. And they need help in making friends. As weird as that sounds, like after school, after college, like they need a little bit of help. So we created a resource called Man Cards that provides conversation starters for men, reducing the awkwardness and allowing us to have, more vulnerability.
Yeah, cool. What kind of change or response have you had from guys who have taken a step and made these kinds of connections, as awkward as that sometimes feels to start?
It's like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
I mean, when you are able to say something, especially about your sexuality, that you've never told anyone before, how much relief and redemption can come from that. And it also involves training each other on how to listen and hold space as well. So a few important postures that I learned from Jay Stringer in his book Unwanted are curiosity and compassion. Curiosity means I'm a learner. I'm not going to try to teach this other person or fix them or solve their problems. I'm going to enter in with curiosity. It's a humble posture of, tell me more about that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then compassion literally means suffering with. Passion, like the passion of the Christ. So we are suffering with each other. And sometimes that means saying, I don't really know what to say right now, but I'm just sitting with you in this.
Yeah. That's good.
So men need to learn those skills. Women need to learn those skills. All adults need to learn curiosity and compassion, but they're sadly all too rare in today's world.
Yeah. You're married.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the recovery journey in marriage on other programs, but I do want to just talk about it with you for a couple minutes. What was it like to walk through your journey with your wife? And then what, for the women who, after all this, may still be listening or watching, what did your wife do that was helpful? Or if there were things that weren't helpful, what might you tell a wife whose husband is struggling in these ways?
Well, my story is a little different because the majority of my recovery and healing took place before marriage.
Sure.
I remember being engaged, going through premarital counseling, sitting in my now wife's living room on a white couch, staring at the carpet. My stomach was in knots. I knew what I had to say, but I didn't want to say it.
Yeah.
And then I looked her in the eyes and I said, Rebecca, there are some sexual fantasies and fetishes I haven't told you about. And I'm not quite as free as you might think I am. Now, she had every right to react authentically. She looked me in the eyes with compassion, tenderness, gentleness, and said, I love you.
I can see some emotion in your face
as
you tell that story. It got you.
It got me. And that actually motivated me more than anything ever did. Her love and acceptance drove me to the conclusion that I have to give her assurance that she won't ever have to worry about secrecy and sexual infidelity in our marriage. I have to become husband material. That's where the name came from.
There you go. There you go.
And so whether you're married or not, that journey of becoming mature and dealing with the parts of my story that were still lurking in the darkness, that has given us so much peace.
Yeah.
And I'm extremely honest with her. When I am feeling something strongly sexually or emotionally, I don't isolate. I move toward her. And when you're talking about pornography, sometimes couples will assume, well, that's not as serious as an affair, or that's not as serious as something in person. But so far, research surveys have shown that online sexual activity has the same impact on partners as what we would call real life. Because infidelity is ultimately, according to Rob Weiss, keeping meaningful, intimate secrets from your partner. And that does the most damage. It's the secrecy even more than the specific sexual activity. So I really think we need to take this as seriously as any other type of breach in wedding vows.
That's good. That's good. That it really is a breach of fidelity.
It is.
Yeah.
It's not comparable to cheating. It is cheating.
Good. That answers a question that I know some women have asked me. I feel like my husband's cheated on me, but he hasn't crossed the, quotes, flesh barrier as best as I know. And that feeling is legitimate. And to the guys, it really is.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
We can't make excuses. We're talking a lot about childhood experiences.
Right.
But that's an explanation, not an excuse.
Good.
We need to take responsibility for our choices as adults and care for the younger parts of us.
Yeah.
At the same time.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. We've mentioned husband material a few times. And I also just want to let our listeners and viewers know you've also written a book, Redeemed Sexuality, 12 Sessions for Healing and Transformation in Community. Would you just talk for a minute specifically about how you connect guys, what you offer, and maybe invite them to connect with you?
Absolutely. At husbandmaterial.com, we are a movement of Christian men changing our brains, healing our hearts, and saving our relationships through healing childhood trauma,
Yeah.
through becoming emotionally and sexually mature, taking responsibility for our issues, growing in self-awareness, self-compassion, and connection with others and with God.
Yeah.
Right? So you can get connected at husbandmaterial.com. We've got a free private community with thousands of men supporting each other on this journey.
Yeah.
And that is what I get to do. So, yeah, thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah. Well, it's been really great, Drew. And if you are listening, check the show notes. If you're watching, check the links under this video. We'll have the links to Husband Material and to Drew's book, Redeemed Sexuality. I also, if you've been watching before or listening, have known, but my books, Expectations, Reframing Your Good and Not So Good Stories About God, Love, and Relationships. This is for both men and women, married and unmarried, helping you look at your sexual story. I can see a lot of interaction between Redeemed Sexuality and this, Drew. So check it out. This isn't about what's on or not on the sin list, although we're not afraid to talk about sin. It's talking about what does it look like to deal with your story and invite Jesus into your story so that you can become whole.
Yes.
That is what he wants for you and what he makes available to you. You know, when Jesus comes into your story, it's like up and to the right, not by trying harder, but his presence makes that transformation possible. Mm-hmm. And that's what we would invite all of you into.
You are describing an experience.
Yes.
Not just an intellectual truth, but having a tangible sense of his saving love, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. When Jesus was here on earth, he came as God with us, Emmanuel, God with us. And neuroplasticity, you know, that's what changes our brains. Mm-hmm. I would love to hear from you. You can come to drcarolministries.com, use the contact page that comes to me confidentially. I would also invite you to go to yoursexpectations.com. You can find out more about the book, and we've got a number of other resources there as well. I want again to thank Focus on the Family and Sexual Integrity Leadership Summit for helping us do this here today. And until next time, God bless you.